Okay, I'll call the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority February 2nd meeting to order. There are no items from the chairman except Happy Groundhog Day. And I understand everybody can start planning their spring plantings because the groundhog saw his shadow or didn't see his shadow, so it's an early spring. So are there any residents to be heard? There are not. Then we'll move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes of the January 5th COPTA board meeting. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. If you all would vote electronically. Motion passes. The second set of minutes is the January 18th special meeting of the COPTA Board or Transportation Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. There are 3 items on the consent docket. The first 2 have to do with renewal of software agreements with Trapeze Software. Jason, did you want to comment on maybe the scope of those 2?
Sure.
Since they're large items.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman. These are renewal items, which we, typically renewals we have on the consent docket. But I agree. I think it's a good idea to mention just due to the significance of the renewal amounts. Item A, let me grab it here. Item A is actually our second amendment and renewal for a sole source system supply agreement with Trapeze Software, DBA TripSpark Technologies. This renewal is for the ongoing support of the software that we use for really our AVL technology. This is what allows us to identify, buses while they're providing service throughout the city. And if you'll recall, we actually implemented this software back around the 2012-2013 timeframe. We've had that in place since then and have annual renewals. So the estimated cost here is $100,000 for this particular renewal, and it will provide ongoing support of that AVL technology. Whereas item B is Amendment 9 and renewal with Trapeze, DBA TripSpark for really a different suite of software. This software we've actually had in place since around 2003. So we've had this ongoing software for that amount of time. This is the software that we use primarily for scheduling our transit services. We're able to develop customer schedules. It also allows us to build schedules for employees' work, to cover the hours that we're operating transit service, and then also has a module for scheduling and delivering our paratransit service. So that's a little bit confusing to some if you're not familiar with that software, why we have 2 different agreements with essentially the same vendor, Trapeze, DBA TripSpark. But that is the reason for that. So happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any questions about these first 2 items on the consent docket? If not, are there any other comments on the consent docket? If not, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, or please vote electronically. Motion passes. Okay, item 6 is items for individual consideration. The first one is A is to receive preliminary engineering plans from CEC for project for the parking lot at 2000 South May Avenue and authorize preparation for final plans and specifications. Jesse?
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Trustees. Everyone's having a great day. Before we get started, I know this is a parking item. Don't let your eyes deceive you. I am not Corey, but we'll be talking about parking at South May. Before we do, I wanted to talk about why we're talking about parking at South May, right? So many of you have been here longer than I have. You've seen Embark continue to grow. It's kind of our common theme that we're constantly growing, right? I did a little bit of a pulse check on our, basically the amount of staffing that we have at South May. Talked to Tracy McLaughlin, who's been with Embark since 1981, and also with Chris back here in the corner. He's been with Embark since 1981 also. And so back in 1981, we had a total of about 150 employees total. And you can see from this graph here, we continue to grow. Currently, as of this morning, we're sitting at 378 employees total. So continued growth. We have 9 new employees starting on Monday. So again, continuing that path of growth, right? And then obviously, with the launch of the BRT, there's our BRT operators, 21 brand new BRT operators. But with that, also we hired 16 maintenance employees, and then also the appropriate admin staff to support the launch of the BRT. So again, the common theme here is growth, right? So that's why we're here to talk about parking at South May. So this is 30% design. So just kind of help us get oriented. So obviously the big gray box in the middle of the screen there is the admin headquarters. To the bottom is South May, right? And north is to the left. So if you've been out to South May lately, you've noticed that we've added gravel parking, right? So that is a temporary solution to expand our parking. This gets us that more permanent solution, the concrete parking. And so in the green on the right side of the screen, that's the added concrete parking. And then kind of in the middle of the screen there, that green shaded area, that is where we'll be removing the monument sign out in front of Embark. Now with that fence, you can't really see it that well anyway, so we're going to relocate that. But this frees up, 5 additional parking spaces there. And then we took a look at the rest of the parking lot to see any areas where we can maximize parking. So there's going to be some restriping done just to really maximize the parking. So at the top of the screen there, you can kind of see what our status as far as parking stalls go. So right now we have 160 standard parking stalls, 10 ADA, 10 motorcycle for a total of 180. When we're complete with this construction, we'll have a total of 229, so an additional nearly 50 parking stalls with the construction of the additional parking at South May. So that will help alleviate some of the constraints that we're having right now with folks being able to find parking stalls. So if you're ever come to South May on a Wednesday, that's when we have a lot of overlap. You may not find a parking stall. So if you do, just holler at us. We'll valet park your car for you. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions for Jesse? Good job. Thank you.
One more question, sorry.
Oh,
Is there additional parking in the back of the building as well? And
Yeah, so as far as like employee parking, there's not. So what we try to do is we try to separate like automobiles, kind of like you see at like a truck stop or something, right? So we try to separate automobiles from our fleet, so our buses, right? It's a little bit harder to see when you're driving a bus. However, we are in the process of adding some additional gravel in the far back of the facility. And there's gate access off of Miller, which is that street that runs along the east side of South May. So what we're going to do is to help alleviate this, because it's going to take us probably 3 months to wrap up the engineering, and then 2 months, 3 months for construction. And we're at capacity right now. So we're going to be adding some gravel to the far east side of our lot there, and doing some compaction with that gravel, making it safe for our maintenance employees. It's closer to the maintenance shop anyway.
Yeah.
So that will help alleviate some of the strain now.
all right, thank you.
okay. If there aren't any other questions or comments, thank you, Jesse. We'll go ahead and ask for a motion. It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item B is the final acceptance of the Transit Center lighting renovation at 420 Northwest 5th Street and placing maintenance bond into effect. Jason?
Yes, sir. Pretty straightforward item, as you mentioned. Final acceptance for the lighting project. We keep in mind we still have some things that we need to wrap up in order to complete the Transit Center renovations in their entirety. But if you recall, we had a contract for the lighting improvements. The lighting improvements are complete, And we look forward to bringing a final acceptance for the rest of the project to the board in the very near future. You'll notice for the final inspection, we had our contractor, our architect, we had staff there. So really, this project, if you haven't been by there in the evenings, and I think staff has shown pictures before, but it's really a dramatic difference. Much brighter environment, much safer feeling, if you will, for all that use it.
Questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to accept? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item C is a resolution ratifying and approving addendas number 1 through 5 and ratifying the administrator's acceptance and approval of a pre-award certifications from Gillig and New Flyer, and awarding and approving the professional services agreement with Gillig and New Flyer for the procurement of 25 CNG buses with an option to purchase an additional 25 40-foot CNG buses, estimated initial cost of $7 million, and to authorize the chairman to fully execute the professional services agreements upon receipt of the signed agreements and certificates of insurance. Jason.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add after that extreme. We tried to make that as succinct as we could, but it just couldn't get to it. So I appreciate you bearing with us on that one. But yeah, really, this is an item where we're asking the trust to really do several things. One, ratifying our addendas, which we typically will send that to the trust with various RFPs and bids. There's addendas that are issued throughout that process. Two is ratifying my acceptance of the pre-award Buy America certifications. And so as we purchase rolling stock, because we're using federal funds to purchase that rolling stock, it's very important that they meet the federal government's Buy America requirements. So a certain amount of the components have to be made in America. So we have reviewed and accepted the percentage and list of parts that are Buy America, and also reviewed the ones that are not. And then we do have a professional services agreement or contract with both Gillig and New Flyer. And that contract, or those contracts, were under review for a considerable amount of time. They're obviously lengthy contracts. We received the okay, if you will, from the FTA. We asked them to review those contracts, and they're now in the hands of the vendors. So we just got those contracts to the vendors, I think, this week. So although our legal team, the FTA's reviewed those, they are in the vendors' hands now. So what we are bringing to the board really is the final piece of this, which is not only approving the agreement, but authorizing the chair, once we receive those agreements back from the vendor, to go ahead and sign those. And that's really just a matter of trying to move forward with our next bus order without having to wait an additional month to bring that back to the board. So two other things to mention quickly about this item. One is we had two proposers, Gillig and New Flyer. Those are really the only remaining two, for the most part, heavy-duty transit bus manufacturers that we can award contracts to that meet Buy America requirements. Both of them proposed, and Gillig's price was $678,939 per bus. New Flyer's price was $687,139 per bus. So right there, about an $8,200 difference. So a little bit different approach. Normally we will pick a manufacturer and award the contract, but because the pricing was so close, like $8,200 difference, we were asking the board to actually authorize agreements with both, so that we as staff and the trust have more flexibility when it comes to availability. So for example, our first call will obviously be to Gillig. They're the lowest price, but if for some reason there's an unforeseen delay or it takes us a long time to get these buses, we have a second option that we can utilize. So that's really the idea of trying to award both the contracts, two contracts for buses. And we currently have both Gilligs and New Flyers in our fleet now, so wouldn't be really any change to our maintenance department. So happy to answer any other questions.
And we have a need to replace some buses this year, 2024.
Yes, we do. And in fact, I appreciate the question because our estimated initial cost of $7 million, of course, is just for that first order of buses that we really need to get underway.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Exciting times to replacing our fleet, and this is a step in that process. So is there a motion to adopt? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item D is to enter into executive session to receive confidential communications from its attorneys concerning the claim of Craig Sanders versus the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, DBA Embark. I think we have to take a individual vote on this, and we will consider it at the heel of the agenda.
Yes, you can vote now to go into executive session.
Okay. Is there a vote around the table?
Yes.
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 Okay. Then we will enter into executive session after we receive the program reports and items from the trustee. So moving on to item 7 is ratification of claims and payroll for a period of January 3rd through January 30th. Is there a motion to ratify? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item 8 is to receive our financial reports. Item A is the COPTA annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023 and 2022. And we have Lindsay Nunn, who is going to help us with that presentation, and all of you should have received the heavy packet of information, which is our annual audit.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to say a couple of comments as ahead of Lindsay. So as the chair mentioned, we have a report in front of you. You'll find a couple of letters in there from our auditor, AGH, and wanted to just point out a couple things. Lindsay's going to certainly hit the highlights of the annual financial report. On page 6 begins the management discussion and analysis. So if you kind of want to, get a summary of what's in the report and kind of the status of the financials, that's a really good place to start. But again, commenting back on the letters from our auditor, AG and AGH, there is a letter that indicates essentially that it's a clean audit, right? So, and that's at the front of the financial report. There's also some correspondence towards the back of the report from AGH. So, AGH comes in, they do their typical audit. Again, we received a clean opinion, if you will. However, also part of what they look at is just the overarching financial controls that we have as an organization. And I just take an opportunity to remind the trust that not only do we have the trust financials, but we also have a COTPA pension, right? That is, part of the overall trust activities. And as the auditor was reviewing some of the pension controls, they actually identified there is a finding where they identified two benefit distributions or payments that one of them was actually calculated incorrectly. The other one, I believe when they tested the file, there wasn't adequate backup. So we've since addressed that. It's obviously a good learning experience. Anytime you have somebody come in and review, we can always do those things better. Point is, the finding itself was not determined to be material. So again, we still have a clean audit, but I wanted to just mention that to the trust. In case you peruse the report, you'll see a finding in the back. It's been addressed, and probably not anything else to say about it. But Lindsay, you want to take it from here?
Thank you. Lindsay Nunn, Accounting Services Division. Thank you for having me this morning. As they said, I'm here to report on the financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. As Mr. Fairbrother said, our external auditors were AGH, and they, again, issued an unmodified and clean opinion and determined that all of our financial statements comply with all relevant accounting standards set forth by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The single audit is still in process for this year. The single audit is a separate report that is required for any non-federal entity that expends more than $750,000 in awarded funds during a fiscal year. We anticipate that should be wrapped up by the end of March. The authority's net position for the fiscal year 23 increased $10.1 million to $117.6 million. Our net capital assets increased $5.7 million or 5.8%. This was primarily due to an increase in construction in progress of $8.9 million, offset by a decrease in our depreciable assets due to retirements. Our bonds payable decreased $425,000 just due to regularly scheduled debt service payments. And again, our bond ratings at June 30th continue to be of high quality, subject to low credit risk. We get those both from Moody's and our Standard & Poor's. Our operating revenues increased $1.4 million for a total of $13.8 million for the fiscal year 23. This was due to increased ridership and increased parking revenues. Our increase in transportation revenues from the City of Norman also contributed to that increase in revenues. Our operating expenses also increased $6.9 million for a total of $59.8 million. This was due to an increase in maintenance expenses, primarily due to contracts related to streetcar and parking operations. Our personnel services also increased just due to increases in salaries and wages. Our net non-operating revenues increased $7.2 million for a total of $55.8 million, and this was due to an increase in the city general fund subsidy, an increase in our interest income, and offset by a decrease in our grants. The net position for the COPPA retirement restricted for pension benefits increased $1.9 million, and the plan's fiduciary net position as a percentage of the total pension liability is 86.52%, and this is as of July 1st, 22, based on the actuarial valuation that we received, and those are always received 1 year behind. And like Mr. Fairbrother said, any additional information can be found in our management's discussion and analysis in the books you were provided, and that's on pages 6 to 11. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Sounds like we're in good financial shape.
Good shape. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving back to the computer side, is there a motion to receive our annual financial report? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Second item on our financial reports is to review the schedule of revenue and expenses budget to actual for the month ending December 31st. Jason?
Yeah, so regarding our budget to actual report, I'll keep my comments to the transportation operations, parking operations, and we'll finish up with streetcars. So if I could direct your attention to page 2, this is the transportation operations, and this is for 6 months ending December 31st. So this is a good snapshot, if you will, of kind of where we're at with our budget versus actuals halfway through the year. So starting on the revenues, as you can see, our total revenue is a little over 19 million. But I wanted to just point out that if you look at our first two revenue sources there, fare box revenue and fare media sales, you can see that we're about 127,000 under budget on what we had projected to collect through the fare box. However, our fare media sales are 34,000 above what we had projected through the budget. So overall, if you think about, our fare revenue in general, we're about 93,000 under what we had anticipated or estimated when we put the budget together. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you look at the federal grant revenue, you'll notice we have a total of 8.5 million budgeted for the entire year. However, as we set the budget up, you'll notice that through 6 months of the fiscal year, we had only anticipated drawing about 2.7 million of that revenue. So really about 32% of our overall grant revenue we had planned to draw through 6 months of the fiscal year, even though we're halfway through the year in terms of expenses and so forth. And the reason we did that is we wanted to extend our current formula grant as long as we could, because we always know during our fiscal year we get between grants. And so we're in a position right now where we're now applying for our next formula grant. And that is the source of funds that will make up the remaining balance that we had originally budgeted of 8.5. So all that said to say is that, we were pretty intentional about basically backloading, if you will, most of the revenue we expect to receive through federal grants. And we will be seeing that come to fruition. In fact, we had 1.7 million in federal reimbursements just this week for our draw we received in January. So anyway, all that said to say is that when you follow the actual year-to-dates all the way down to the bottom line operating loss and income, you'll see that expenses actually exceed revenues by 2.5 million halfway through the year. You'll recall when we met last month, I think we were about 950,000 were expenses in excess of revenues. So my comments today are really just to reassure the trustees that we will, by the end of the year, collect the majority of the anticipated revenues. So we'll start seeing significant amounts, larger amounts of grant draws. You'll notice we're still anticipating receiving over $1 million from the state. By the way, that paperwork is in process. So hopefully by the time we meet next month, we'll have received at least the first payment of that state subsidy. So we have a lot of revenues that are coming in at the back half of the fiscal year is really my main point. But we'll continue to monitor that. As far as expenditures go, I also wanted to point out that our personal services expenditures are 1.3 million over budget through halfway through the fiscal year. The primary reason for that variance is we actually had 3 payrolls in December. As we were putting the budget together and forecasting, we actually only budgeted, if you will, or had only projected for 2. So that will catch up and even out as we go throughout the year. And then finally, my last comment, and this is probably something we'll be talking about the rest of the fiscal year, is our supplies budget. So you can see we're $800,000 over on our supplies budget through 6 months of the fiscal year, which is pretty significant. This is primarily due to increases in the price for bus parts. We've been looking at this very closely as staff. We will continue to look at it closely. The payments to the city transportation fund and the savings we're having for fuel are offsetting a big portion of that overage in supplies. But again, we will continue to monitor that, and without a doubt, the budget will be tight by the end of the year on our expenditures. I think that'll wrap up my comments, and I'll move on to parking. Parking, page 4 of your budget to actual. Again, I'll just mention the bottom line here. You can see that so far, halfway through the year, our revenues exceed our expenses by almost $1.4 million. So parking is in really good shape this fiscal year. In terms of revenues go, we're about $160,000 over on what we had budgeted. That's primarily more event and transient parking. A lot of that has to do with the Thunder activity and the great season the Thunder is having. On expenditures, you'll notice that our parking garage operations and our other services and fees, which is a lot of pass-throughs related to parking operations, are both slightly under budget. And then finally, wrapping up with streetcar, again, looking at kind of the bottom line, our revenues are in excess of our expenditures by $446,000 through 6 months of the fiscal year. Revenues are virtually on target, slightly under by $28,000, but we are seeing some savings on our expenditure side. So we're about $80,000 less in expenses than what we had projected, and that's due primarily to pass-through services and parts coming in less than anticipated. So that is one thing, though, that we probably won't hold out for the rest of the year. The streetcar parts kind of they can get expensive, and we'll just see where we go. But we're in good shape through 6 months of the fiscal year. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions and comments on our financial report? So what you're saying on the transit side is that our fund balance dipping down to 1.3 million is, we're in good shape to not see that continue to decline.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, and you may, or we may see that continue, to decline a bit, keeping in mind that, here it is February, we're reviewing December's financials, so we'll bring January's to you, but eventually we will catch up. But I think that's a good opportunity to just, I guess, state why it is so important that we keep that fund balance of, approximately $4 million, because we generally will see these uses of fund balance as we're between grants, waiting on revenue and so forth, yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, is there a motion to receive our financial report? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Moving on into our program reports. The first one is presentation on the Rapid Northwest and the transit system report. Jesse?
Good morning, I'm back. Hopefully everyone had a chance to see the wonderful news article or news story that came out yesterday. News 9 went out and took a look at our system, interviewed several of our riders and our customers, and all good news, so it was good stuff. All right, so first we'll be talking about the Rapid. So just kind of make sure that we're on the same page here. So showing December ridership here, all right? So you've seen this ridership data. This is the same ridership data that we shared last month. But trying to get this information in line with our transit reports, or the rest of our transit report is December information, so just making sure we're in alignment there. So for December, we carried 31,721 customers. Our average daily ridership was just a little over 1,000. Now, to put this into comparison, our next highest ridership routes are Route 3 and Route 8, and they're averaging around 800 to 850 riders per day. So this, this is our highest performing route at this point. Again, caveat or footnote, this is December, so this was the first month of operation. However, we are monitoring January's ridership, and we're pretty on par with where we were with December, so it's pretty good news. Obviously, with the ice storm that we had, we saw a slight dip there where we dipped down to about 420 riders. But again, 420 customers in an ice storm is pretty good. And then taking a look at our average, right? So for December, our average weekday was about 1,100 riders. And then our average weekend was about 939 customers. So again, folks are using this system just like we anticipated, right? To get to where they're going, where they're trying to go. And really this kind of goes back to, I think we talked about it at last board meeting. It goes back to that frequency, right? That's what our customers are wanting, that 12 to 15 minute frequency. And also really opportunity to give a shout out to our planning staff, right? With Chip Nolan, making sure that we're making sure that our routes are going where people need to go. And so this Rapid Northwest is exactly doing that. And then also with OKC Moves, realigning Route 3, right? So Route 3 connects with the Rapid Northwest, getting folks where they need to go and getting them there quickly. All right, so kind of the way this thing goes is I'm working through all the different modes, so if at any point you want to stop and talk about Rapid, be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to a fixed route. All right. So kind of wanted to take a moment to pause here. So on January 22nd, we had winter weather, ice storm hit Oklahoma City, all right? And then our staff went into that winter weather mode. So what does that look like? So specifically for our utility maintenance staff, they go into 12-hour shifts, right? Making sure that they're covering all of our service and making sure that in the morning whenever our bus operators arrive at the transit center and our customers arrive at the transit center, that it's safe for travel, right? Making sure that the sidewalks are clear, that there's no eye spots or anything like that. And really just Glenn Nolan, he's over our utility folks there, and he's got a fantastic staff. Again, working 12-hour shifts, working overnight, coming in and making sure that our facilities are safe. They'll go out and salt and clear our platforms, and then also making sure that our facility at South May is safe, right? So I got to admit that this is the best it's ever looked. So they put in a lot of hard work, a lot of hours. This is just an example of what our transit center looked like, right? So if you're out and about during that storm and we're in parking lots, it was hazardous, right? So there was a lot of ice out there. This is what our transit center looked like at 6 o'clock in the morning. Perfectly clear, perfect and safe for everybody to get around and get where they needed to be. So really appreciate all the hard work that they put into it to making sure that our service was safe. And then our Embark's mobility management team, they participated in the Ward 7 Town Hall on January 23rd. Right? They had a booth set up there to be able to share information about the mobility management services that they provide, and just friendly faces, right? They're out there sharing what we do, and really proud of the team there coming in after hours to be at that Ward 7 Town Hall. And then also we participated in the MLK Junior Holiday Parade, the 40 years worth, January 27th. We had a bus in the parade, and fantastic turnout. Even though the weather was a little chilly, still had fantastic turnout, and appreciate staff participating in that. So now we'll talk a little bit about our fixed route ridership, right? So our monthly total for December was 231,000. Again, we're seeing increases over previous years. So we saw a 10% increase over 2022 and almost 23% over 2021. So folks are coming back to the systems and looking good. Our average weekday ridership for December was 8,800. And this, again, increase over the previous 2 years, 26% increase over 2022, and nearly 63% increase over 2021. And then our weeknight ridership increases here as well. So 366 for December, 36% increase over December of last year, and nearly, or 83% increase over 2021. And then our weekend ridership, 3,800 customers used our services over the weekends. Again, folks got to get where they need to go, get to those jobs, and our weekend service provides that for them. Increase over, or 40% increase over 2022, 62% increase over 2021. And then for our paratransit services, so we saw 3,800 riders use our services, paratransit services in December. This is a 10% increase over 2022. Slight decrease over 2021. That's when folks were coming back from COVID using our system, our paratransit services again. But again, like we've talked about before, we learned a lot through COVID, right? Folks are using the telehealth and things like that. So we're seeing this start to steady out. All right, we'll move into our streetcar. So OKC Streetcar saw one of its best months in a long time. Actually, in almost 2 years, right? So December 2023, we saw 25,000 riders use our services. We attribute this to the fact that downtown December was going on, and part of our agreement is that we provide complimentary rides through the end of December all the way through December. End of November all the way through December on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, getting folks to those events downtown. And this just goes to prove when there are events and folks downtown out and about, the streetcar is a perfect example of how to get around and using that service exactly as we intend. So this was a 14% increase over 2022 and almost a 5% increase over 2021. Our average weekday ridership is right around close to 600 for 2023. This is a 24% increase over last year and just a tiny bit decrease over 2021. And our average weekend ridership, this is of course when most folks are using our system, the OKC Streetcar system, about 1,300 riders on average. All right, let's talk Spokies. So Spokies ridership is up. In December, we had 229 customers use our Spokey system. This is a 33% increase over last year and almost a 30% increase over the 2021. Again, we're rolling out those e-bikes and we're converting our old fleet to the new system and getting those bikes out there too. And then we talked about last transit report. We're also in the process of, we received a clean air grant from ACOG to install bike racks. And we've got about 70 of those bike racks to be installed. And we're anticipating those being installed in March. And then for our river cruises, again, Mark is back there in the back, and he provides our river cruises with HMS ferries. Just pointing out that we're not in service right now, so this is the time that when we pull those vessels out of the water and make sure that we maintain that Bristol condition that Mark and his team have been able to do since they've taken over, or since they started service. Again, that Bristol condition is basically the highest level of condition that you can have for a water vessel, so really appreciate Mark and his staff making that happen. We go back into service in April, and so we're getting all of our services ready to go, getting prepped for that to happen. But I did want to take an opportunity to show our ridership in November. So we had about 138 customers use our river services, slight increase over the previous year, and a slight decrease over 2021. And then we also provide those charters and those special events, right? So we had 2 boats carrying approximately 48 passengers, and they participated in the Holiday River Parade. And this is a photo of what our boat looks like when it's out during that parade. We outfitted with the Christmas lights, really get into that Christmas spirit, right? But we also had 6 private charters in December carrying 110 customers on our river vessels, again, making sure that folks are able to use those services even in December. And then I did want to point out one thing here also, just really a shout out to Mark and his team. So during those winter weather events, right, we had some pretty substantial cold weather. You know, I think we got down to negative wind chills, but we were down into like the teens, right? So his team goes out and to help protect that equipment, those vessels, they install heaters in the boats, but then they also install agitators, right? So it's basically, you think about like these buoys in the water that sit there and agitate the water to prevent ice from building up around the boat, potentially damaging the equipment or the boat itself. So again, a lot of effort goes into making sure that we're protecting our equipment and providing safe travel for our customers during those winter weather events. That wraps up the transit report. Be happy to take any questions.
So are the private charters available through these closed months of February and March also?
That's right. Well, let me double check with Mark. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we do that all year round
That's right.
on the
Yep.
private charters. That's good. Are there other questions or comments?
Do we have an estimate of when the new landing will be open at the resort?
Oh, I think, so you're talking about the Ocana, the property there? I'd have to double check, but I think it's looking to, I mean, they're moving pretty fast. I think they're looking to get that wrapped up this year. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, other than the last page of the program report always shows the total number of riders for the first 6 months of this year versus last month.
Yeah.
We're only up 200,000 riders in our total system. That's over 10%. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's going well. It's really, you know, our staff out there providing the service that they do, providing it really, really well. Yeah.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Okay. The second program report is our, excuse me, let me get back to the screen, is Kristen's going to talk about our capital improvement projects.
Yes, good morning. I have some good news to share with you all. So we opened part of the TC back in November, and we are opening the rest of it next Monday. So very excited about that. So I will walk you through the transit center remodel. What you're looking at was the existing operator break area, so it's very tiny. There was only a mini fridge available. There was like a table and maybe 2 or 3 chairs, so very limited space. This is the new operator break area, and Lisa and her team are working on additional furniture for here. I know they're getting some soft furniture, but you can see the cafe tables and chairs are here. There's a large fridge, as well as 2 vending machines that the operators can access. The paper coverings on the windows are temporary. Lisa's team is also working on window coverings, so a lot more space to spread out. Excuse me. This is the additional millwork that was put in. This is looking opposite of what we just saw. So there's additional cabinet space, storage space, places for coffee pots, microwaves, etc. And then Lisa and her team have done a great job of labeling everything. I love a good label maker moment. So it's all very organized. And then this is looking towards the south. So this is the portion that I'll reopen on Monday morning. So you can see the exterior of the restrooms and then the rest of the building here. This is also looking over to the south. So this is the entrance to the women's restroom. I'm gonna show you a before photo just as a comparison. It wasn't like a very full before photo. I will do better about that next time. But you can see kind of how kind of dingy, dreary it is. And now it's much brighter. So there's the changing station, upgraded sinks, there's a hand dryer, and the women's restroom, we were also able to have a utility closet in there, and then we have the 3 stalls. So upgraded lighting, you know, paint, the wall coverings, all of that. The floor is a sturdy epoxy floor that mimics the terrazzo look, but, you know, easy to clean and maintain. And then this is looking opposite at the men's restroom, you know, bringing that wall covering, the Decton outside as well. This was the before men's restroom. So again, brightened it all up with the same amenities. We also have a changing station in the men's restroom. And then we have these pull down doors for our maintenance staff for when they clean. So they can pull them down, lock them from the inside, get their job done, and then reopen them. So safety measure for them. This is the new information area where we have all of our schedules, all of the changes that we made for OKC Moves. You can see the big wall map there, so it's easy to find, easy to read. And then we have the rapid map off to the side there. And then we reopened the bubble in November, so you can see Paula in there helping customers. They have all of their equipment set up. It's ready to go, so. And then, does anybody have any transit center questions before I move on? Okay.
I do.
Yes.
Thanks. Great work on that project. what is the cleaning frequency for these lovely new restrooms we have constructed? Like how often?
Is it twice a day? Every hour? Okay.
Every
Sorry,
hour.
I was very wrong
Okay.
on that.
I just mention it as someone who, my road trips are very intentional about where I stop because of the frequency that people clean their restrooms in terms, well, I won't even name the places, but you know what I mean. You know, you have your places. But so I think this is important for probably a lot of folk who have actually reached out to me about restrooms in the transit center. So.
Yeah. Monday's the day. And then for the BRT, we have 4 punch list items to get done. And then just a couple of open items. We have things like there are 3 platforms that have the one ramp, and so we're going to be adding a little concrete pad for people who are accessing their bicycles on the front of the bus. We're also adding that sidewalk connection to Penn Square Mall, so that's also an open item. And then the intersection evaluation for additional improvements. I know Councilperson Cooper had asked for that, so we'll be looking at things like improving the crosswalks to make things safer. This will also be part of the Vision Zero, like you had asked. And then our last BRT stakeholder meeting is February the 13th. Our last meeting that we had was in November, and then obviously we launched in December. So this will be kind of a, what are you hearing from people who are riding the system? Also a huge thank you to everybody who was a part of this. I know Mr. Sumner was, Councilperson Cooper as well. We really appreciate all of your help with that. And then we will basically just kind of disband until we move on to the next 2 BRT systems, and then get people who are also in those areas to help set up a new stakeholder group for both the north and the south, northeast and south. So that is all I have. Any questions for me?
Are there any questions or comments for Kristen? If not, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion to receive our program reports? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Items from our trustees. James?
Yes, just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Dillon, Becky, whose last name I'm not sure, so forgive me, and then Jason Fairbrush. My mother is quite grateful that we were able to utilize the mobility management services to connect to her first physical therapy appointment after she fell the week of Christmas. So this week she was able to utilize that service. And I spoke with her, I think a couple nights ago on the phone on her birthday. That's right. Why would I forget that? But we were on the phone for about an hour, and I will tell you, she dedicated a solid half hour to singing the praises of Embark. I just can't stress this enough. She turned 80, and that fall, more than she had let on to me, had really sent her into despair. And it reminded me when we did MAPS 4 and we were talking about the possibility of a 5th senior wellness center. There was a woman who came up to the podium, and she just described how many people, as they age, the way loneliness will settle in. And hearing my mother, articulate that anew, just reminded me how important that mobility management work is, and connecting seniors to the senior wellness centers, let alone their doctor appointments and their grocery shopping. And it actually just reminded me, why in the first place I wanted to get involved in all this, is I think that in this work with COTPA, when we have such a sprawling city and it relies on the car to get you to sometimes your closest neighbor, but to recreation and to community gathering, I think there's probably more people than we would care to admit who feel very disconnected from community. And there's a lot of loneliness out there that I think that COTPA has the ability to start chipping away at. And I can just tell you from my own family, that's what happened. And so I'm just really, really grateful that level of despair I heard my mother articulate, I hope I never hear again, not just from her, but from anybody. So I just really am grateful to everybody who got her to the road to recovery. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Meg? Jason?
Yeah, just a quick comment to, again, thank really our bus operator, Pam, that helped us with the Martin Luther King Day Parade. She did a great job operating the bus as we would expect, and appreciate Trustee Cooper joining us on the bus. And the other thing I wanted to mention was thank you very much for the comments, Trustee Cooper, about those transportation services. I think, that's a really good example of, Jesse was talking earlier about the growth that we've seen as an organization. At one time, we had 2 employees basically managing all that mobility management services, if you will, obviously reporting to Marilyn, and you saw a picture of at least 5, right? So those kind of transportation services, there's continuing to be a demand for that. And again, recalling just, I think, a board meeting or 2 ago with the board authorizing additional agreements with Department of Human Services and such to expand those services. We'll hopefully be able to continue to try to chip away at filling that gap like you described. And then finally, as far as winter weather goes, really appreciate Jesse mentioning our maintenance staff and all the work that they do. We also have demands on our operations, of course, just because of the additional challenges, but I thought it was also a good opportunity to just mention to the trust, that we also activate additional service a lot of times during those type of conditions, primarily to get folks that are experiencing the need for a night shelter to the day shelter, and then vice versa, when the day shelter closes, back to the night shelter. So there's also some demands on our operators, and sometimes we have to be pretty nimble about when we get those services out. So again, really just recognizing the operations staff, supervisors, and operators for making that happen, and sometimes it's on a pretty short notice.
Okay, good, thank you. I had 2 things I wanted to bring up. One of them was at our Transportation Committee meeting earlier in January, the rapid MAPS 4 recommended alternative routes were discussed, and it was exciting to see that after our exciting launch of the Rapid Northwest, that we have 2 future routes, one going to the south and one going to the northeast, that are solidifying, and the planning process continues to churn, and one of these days we'll have additional rapid routes, and that's exciting. The other one was that, shout out to Michael and his group on the apps that they have brought out. It reminded me I needed to go on my phone and look at the apps that I had, and I downloaded 2 new ones this week, that route planners, and that went along with the Embark and the I forget the toll.
Token transit, perhaps?
Token transit ones, but it was already planning a route because it knew my location and the closest bus to where I was, and so those apps are very helpful and a very good
And not
thing.
creepy at all.
And not creepy at all. That's right. So anyway, thank you. So at this point, we'll go ahead and move into executive session that we've already voted on. So thank you all. We'll be back in a minute. No, I don't think so. I'll go ahead and adjourn the COPTA meeting. Thank you.